Chapter 33. Goodbyes. 4 bruised and battered teenagers sat in the lounge, where only a few short months ago their incredible adventure had begun. Sam could never have imagined it would end like this. "I can't believe they're gone," Veronique sniffed, her red-rimmed eyes fresh with tears. Fedor cradled her hand in his. Joe stared at the floor. He had no tears. He should have. He usually cried at anything. But he felt too broken. The intruders used the crucible as a distraction, Mr. D'Angelo said. They must have known everyone would be there. Reuben should have been too. Their intent was theft, not murder. Joe swore. "You mean it was Harbinger? Stop treating us like kids. You opened this can of worms. Their intention doesn't matter. All that matters is what they did." Sam noticed that this time Salvador had no glib answer. "We think a Harbinger used the stolen cybernetic assistant to program a turner with the coordinates to the library. There's no other explanation." "But why would Troy have the coordinates to the library?" Jenny asked. D'Angelo explained to the teenagers that Troy was, in fact, Archimedes, the CA program to help Reuben catalogue the old library. He had been reassigned to Ivan when it became clear that the Order needed someone with considerable experience to differentiate between his harmful and benign nocturnal ramblings. "Do we know what they took?" Jenny was solemn. Mr. D'Angelo shook his head. "No. And I'm afraid, given the extent of the damage to the library, there's no way to tell. Not in the short term, at least." "What'll happen now?" Joe's thirst for vengeance was raw. "Bade will find them." Salvador's tone was cold. "Rescue the monk and reclaim what is ours. Reuben will have justice." They sat in silence for a few moments, before Joe asked another question. "And his library?" Mr. D'Angelo looked at the ruined chamber. "It'll close." He shrugged. "There's no one left with his knowledge or passion to sort this mess out." Joe looked up with renewed purpose. "I'll do it." Salvador suppressed his laugh when he saw the boy was serious. "Perhaps in a few years, when you finish school." He tried to sound diplomatic. "We could consider it. For now, we'll clean things up as best we can." "I finished school." "You what?" Sam gawped. "I graduated this year." He shrugged. "I was pushed up a year, several in fact. The curriculum was easy, and the teachers got tired of me correcting them." "We know how they feel." Fedor winked. "Well," Mr. D'Angelo took a breath, letting the idea settle. "If you finish school, then technically you should be starting your induction. For which I am too young, and quite frankly not cut out for." "This could be a good stopgap," Jenny suggested. Sam was glad when she lent more weight to the cause. Let me think on it. I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying yes. Yet, either." Mr. D'Angelo silenced further debate with a wave of his hand. "For now we have more somber matters to attend to." Reuben's funeral was held in Venice. The days since the attack on the old library were the hardest of the summer. The loss of Gen C was felt keenly. Harbinger had struck at the heart of the few, and no one felt safe. Security was present everywhere, but it did little to fill the gaping hole the monk had left, or dull the painful memory of Reuben's passing. Jenny did her best to help them try and make sense of it all, as did their parents. But everything was different now. Their own near-death experiences had made the importance of their training and the danger Harbinger posed suddenly very real. Cassius and Camille, the freezer, dark mods, and the host of other mysteries that had surfaced over the summer no longer seemed so important, and were quietly shipped to the back of Sam's mind. Reuben's body was laid to rest at sunset. in an unmarked family crypt, joining a long line of lauded ancestors. The canals were illuminated by hundreds of small floating candles. His eulogy had been poignant, and the size of the congregation bore testament to how many lives this larger-than-life character had touched, despite his seclusion. There was not a dry eye when they said their goodbyes, pushing the small glowing vessels out into the fading light across the water. "Think they'll let you do it?" Sam asked, while he, Fedor, and Joe watched Veronique and Jenny light their candles. "The library?" Joe shrugged. "IDK? Hope so. I think he'd want me to." Sam nodded. "There's nobody better." Joe blushed and his friend slapped him on the back. "Come on," Fedor suggested. "Let's get something to eat." Despite the somber mood, Sam laughed for the first time in a week. "I see some things will never change." The next day, the teenagers and Jenny were summoned to Mr. D'Angelo's office. "Suffice to say, we're all deeply saddened and concerned by recent events," he began. "Gen C's absence is felt by all of us. But we must focus on the here and now, as he would have us. You've all shown considerable promise over the summer, and, despite the council being unable to gauge the fruits of your labour firsthand, the programme has been deemed a success. For now. So, we've passed?" Sam felt his chest tighten. With everything that had happened, it had seemed inappropriate to mention the sword still dangling above their heads, but it had weighed heavily on all their minds. Mr. D'Angelo gazed at the frosty tip of Mount Kilimanjaro through his far-sight window for what felt like an eternity. "You have. But we will need you to return next year, to continue your training." Sam saw Joe blanch. "You can't be serious. After everything that's happened, I'm not cut out for this. None of us are." "I'm very serious, and you need to give yourselves more credit. We need to make radical changes now more than ever." Salvador patted the boy on the shoulder and walked over to the cabinet beside his desk. Ever the master of misdirection, he picked up a box and offered it to them. "In the interim, however, I think you'll be needing this." "Go on," Veronique prompted, when Joe didn't move. "Open it." Joe, still baffled by what he heard, or how they could possibly be considering doing this all again, took the box and put it down on the desk. "Here." Veronique swatted away his idle hands. Inside was a shiny new CA. Joe stared at it. "I don't understand," he said, looking up. Sam watched Mr. D'Angelo smile his most fabulous fake smile. "Well, if you're going to sort out that tip of a library, you're going to need some help, and I'm afraid I simply can't spare anyone else." Joe's eyes widened. The distraction had worked. "Really? You're going to let me do it?" "On one condition," Mr. D'Angelo applied the golden handcuff. "Next summer, you join your friends again." "But Reuben, Gen C are things you cannot do anything about. We'll handle that. This, however, is how you can help. Will you join the few?" There was a long pause. "Yes." Mr. D'Angelo smiled. Fedor pursed his lips. "Does he get to name it?" He pointed to the box. Mr. D'Angelo shrugged, but nodded. Sure." "Can I make a suggestion?" Joe looked dubious. "Go on." "Turtle." The mood instantly lightened. Nothing would undo recent events, but at some point they would have to move on. "Turtle it is." Joe managed a smile. "One final piece of housekeeping." Mr. D'Angelo pointed to the table beside the box. "I'll need your cruiser back, for now." This request was met with general dejection, but they all surrendered the relics, reluctantly. It was then that Veronique noticed something strange. Having never seen all 4 carvings in the same place before, their size and shapes appeared to have no meaning. But when the pieces lay beside one another, moving them around, the cruci's pattern began to make sense. She made a few more adjustments. Ooh, Jo peered over her shoulder. I didn't know they did that. Look, it forms a circle. But there's one missing, and there's an inscription on the side. Elva Deresdai. Mr. D'Angelo's hand swooped in and swept up the stones. That's enough of that. I've got the only dodecahedron Rubik's Cube in existence around here somewhere, if it's a puzzle that you're after. But, Jo pointed, but nothing. Don't you have a CA to commission? That library's not going to sort itself out, young man. Now, scoot, all of you. He ushered the 4 teenagers toward the door. I wonder what it means, Jo pondered out loudly when they reached the door. What? Veronique asked. The inscription on the crucifer. Elva Deresdai. Persephone, hovering nearby, overheard the seemingly innocent question. It means the Hall of 1,000 Worlds, she translated. Out! Mr. D'Angelo fumed, glaring at the robot. The door closed with a bang. There's definitely something about the crucifer he doesn't want us to know, Veronique said. And that to about 1,000 other mysteries and unanswered questions, Sam sighed. And yet he expects us to come back. All right, Jenny shook her head. That's enough negativity and conspiracy for one day. We can't do anything about what happened to Reuben, but we can try and prevent it from happening again. And stop fretting about Gen C. If anyone can take care of himself, it's him. Trust me. Now, back to the library. Then, it's home for you lot, and a long overdue holiday for me. The final goodbyes were hard. Sam had not realized how bad the prospect of not seeing his friends for a year would seem. But neither did he relish the idea of returning. I could create a group chat for us, he suggested, looking forward to the thought of finally getting his phone back. Yes, Veronique agreed, though chatting and you, she gave Fedor a meaningful dig in the ribs. I don't have a phone, otherwise I'd give it a go, he grunted. Besides, it's Turtle and Turtle Jr. who are the least likely to keep in touch. YCMU, the pair declared in unison. Barely an hour together, and they couldn't be more alike. Sam laughed. Jo and the freshly hatched turtle, resplendent in his new shiny green paint job, exchanged a startled look. Sam surveyed the library. You've certainly got your work cut out for you. Veronique turned to Jenny. You'll keep us posted about Gen C and let us know when they find him? Jenny nodded. Oh, and that reminds me, I have presents for you. She fished in her pocket and pulled out 4 badges. Took some doing, but Nessie found it. This is your sigil. The Stone Thieves. Oh, wow! Veronique examined the ornate emblem. Are those... the crucifer? Jo cut her off. Yes. Wait, does that mean the first cadre stole the crucifer? But from whom? Jenny smiled mysteriously. Come back next year and maybe I'll tell you. Now, hugs, kisses and handshakes. I'm late for a date in Cabo. But, Jo protested, no more questions.